Hello, my name is Heather Bradbury, and I'm the manager of the Master's of Professional Studies in the Business of Art and Design program here at Maryland Institute College of Art. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second I Heart Art Baltimore workshop, sponsored by MICA and Etsy. Our speaker tonight is Megan Auman, who's the founder of Crafting an MBA website, and she'll be covering the topic of finding your market. So welcome, Megan, and let's get going.
All right, thanks, Heather. I really want to thank MICA and Etsy for having me here to give this talk today. So a little bit of my background, I am trained as a metalsmith. I studied metals and jewelry in both undergrad and grad school, and I've been running my own business since 2007. In December of 2009, I decided to start a website, Crafting an MBA, designed at business thinking for designers and makers, because I'm a little bit of a nerd. I like to talk about business, and so I thought, why not share that with some other people? So tonight we're going to talk about finding your market. So the first question is, what is a market? So my dictionary defines a market as any one of a variety of systems, institutions, procedures, social relations, and infrastructures whereby businesses sell their goods, services, and labor to people in exchange for money, which is a really long way of saying that no one knows exactly what a market is. But basically, it's a place where goods or services are bought and sold. Your market for your products is going to be determined by two things: the stuff you make, your products, and the people who buy it, your customers. So these two factors determine how, when, and where you sell, and market your products. And that's going to be different for every single business based on those two factors. Now, not understanding your market leads to wasted time, wasted money, and wasted energy. And understanding your market is the difference between success and failure in business. I think so many creative people, we start out and we're like, I have this great idea, I'm going to make this thing, or I love to, knit, so I'm going to make knit stuff. And we never take the time to figure out, who our market is, where our market is, and that's why your business isn't successful. So let's just look at an example. So Apple's education store. Imagine with me for a minute that the only products that Apple sells are computers geared at college students. So in this case, we would have their product, computers, and we would have their customer, which would be college students. Now, these two things are going to determine where their products are sold. So they're going to sell and market their products on college campuses, and you'll see some universities have Apple stores right on campus. Others just do marketing and direct mail. So that's their where. When they're going to focus their sales and marketing efforts at the start of the semester. Now you might think, well, right, it's the start of the semester. College students need computers, but they're actually doing that because start of the semester is when college students get their loan checks. So they're thinking about their target audience to determine when they're going to do the bulk of their marketing. And then the how. So they're going to offer a free iPod with purchase because college students love free stuff and they're thinking about their target market. All right, but you're thinking, I'm not Apple. Why is it important for me to understand my market? Well, guess what? You aren't Apple, and that means you have an even harder time building your market share. So it's really critical that you look at your market so that you have less wasted time, less wasted money, and of course, what everybody wants, more sales. All right, so let's talk about the myth of universal appeal. Everyone likes to think that their products appeal to almost everyone, but this kind of thing can actually keep you from reaching your true customers. So even brands that we think of as universal actually have very clear and very distinct target markets. So Naomi Dunford, who runs a site called Itty Biz, and if you've never checked it out, you should do that. Just know there's a little swearing that goes on there. It's part of her shtick. So Naomi Dunford shares this example of the target markets of 3 fast food giants. The target demographic of McDonald's is the mothers of young children. Yes, everybody goes there, but they really want the moms of the under 12 set. No McNuggets for the little ones and salads for the moms. The target demographic of Burger King is young men between the ages of 18 and 29. Note, very large burgers for very low prices and a really lousy kids menu. And the target demographic of Wendy's is health-conscious adults between the age of 30 and 45, generally female. Note the proliferation of salads and baked potatoes instead of fries. Now, here are 3 businesses in what we would consider the same industry, but they have incredibly different target markets. This specificity is what drives all the marketing efforts and all the product choices of each of these establishments, and that kind of specificity can work for your business too. So let's break down the 2 key components that define your market in more detail: your products and your customers. Your products. When you set out to design a new product, the worst thing you can do is focus on designing for everyone. Instead, you should focus on a niche. So what is a niche? A niche is a specialized but profitable corner of the market. Catch that? Specialized and profitable. That's key. We're looking for where the money is. So why should you focus your products on a niche? First, a niche helps you stand out in a crowded product category. If you sell on Etsy, you're probably thinking, I have a crowded product category. You sell jewelry, it's crowded. You sell photography, it's crowded. You sell knitwear, it's crowded. Every product category is crowded these days. So by having a niche, it's going to help you stand out in a crowded product category. There are a couple of ways that you can create a niche with your products. The first one is that you can create a niche through materials. So this is Juliet Ames. She's a Baltimore local artist, and her business is the Broken Plate Pendant Company. Juliet is trained as a jeweler. She has a lot of skills, a lot of materials that she could work with, and she's choosing to focus on only broken plates, and that's how people know her. This is Margot Lang. Margot is actually a MICA alum, and she makes her entire line out of Barbies. Cut up Barbie heads, cut up Barbie arms, you name it, she's doing it, and she is known as the person who makes jewelry out of Barbies. And then this is Caitlin Phillips of Rebound Design, and she makes all purses out of books. So everything that she's doing is focused around creating products using books. So these are 3 very distinct materials that you can work with. All right, so maybe you don't want to limit yourself to just one material. You can also create a niche through the subject matter that you're using in your work. So this is Sarah from Girls Can Tell. Sarah does silkscreen printed housewares, and there's definitely a lot of that going on. But everything that Sarah uses is a diagram of some sort. So when you think of Girls Can Tell, she wants you to think of the person that diagrams stuff. And she's diagrammed bicycles, cameras, hamburgers, a pint of beer. So she'll diagram just about anything, but the key is that she's always breaking stuff down to a diagram. All right, so this is the steel cow, and she literally makes paintings of cows all day long. Big paintings, small paintings, murals, note cards, you name it, it's got a cow on it. Now, I can hear some of your complaints that focusing on this narrow of a subject matter is really going to restrict your creativity. But the truth is that the opposite can happen. I was lucky enough to go to the Etsy Success Symposium where Noah Scalin talked about his skull a day, where literally every single day for an entire calendar year, he created a different skull. And he said it wasn't until maybe like day 100 where the things really started to get good because he was pushing his creativity to new places. So don't think that by limiting yourself, you're going to limit your creativity. You could spend your whole life painting cows, really. And then this is the Great Northern, and this is another great story I heard about at the Etsy Success Symposiums. They do embroidery, and there's plenty of little embroidery stuff out on Etsy, but everything in their shop is themed around Twin Peaks, the TV show. So they have this really specific niche that they're targeting based on the subject matter. And what they said was when they were first doing embroidery and it was just kind of generic stuff, they weren't selling very much. And once they focused in on this niche, their sales went through the roof because people who were fans of Twin Peaks told other people who were fans of Twin Peaks, and people were talking about them. All right, so you can also create a niche through aesthetic or style. Now, this one's more difficult because there's only so many prevailing aesthetics, but it can work. So this is Ashley G. and Drew, and Ashley is a really well-known illustrator. She's kind of one of the Etsy, original Etsy rock stars. And when she started out, this was a really, really distinct style. You didn't see anyone else making stuff like that. Now, the challenge with going with an aesthetic is that it's easy for copycats. So now there's a lot of Ashley G copycats. But at the time, this was a really, really distinctive style, and it really set her apart. So the other thing that you can do when you're thinking about niche by aesthetic and style is think about what the dominant aesthetic in your product category is and do the complete opposite. So this is just a randomly selected group of photographs from the timeline in Etsy. And you can see they all have this sort of soft vintagey feel. So if I was a photographer, I would actually go in and figure out what can I do that's the complete opposite of that. Because then if someone's scrolling through the Etsy searches, yours is going to stand out because it looks different. And then the last thing that you can do is create a niche through your branding. So Naomi Dunford, in one of her posts, talks about this example, this trend in London where every mom decided they were going to become like a mompreneur and they were all going to sell baby clothes. But they all kind of sold the same baby clothes. And her argument was that you should actually go ahead and develop like a really specific brand. So maybe you are like the fundamentalist Christian baby clothes maker. And it might not actually be any different in terms of what it looks like, but through like your website, the tags that you're using, your branding, you're going to really hone in and demonstrate that niche because it gives people something to focus on. The other key when it comes to having a niche is a niche helps you develop brand loyalty. You have to accept the fact that when you pick a niche, not everyone will like your products. Some people will think they're stupid. Some people will hate them. But, and here's the key, the people who love them will be fiercely loyal to you. And fiercely loyal customers buy more and they pay more. So Naomi has this to say, if you pick a niche, you lose some customers. If you don't pick a niche, you lose all customers. Because if you're not in a niche and your stuff looks like everybody else's, then they have no reason not to just roll over to somebody else. All right, so let's do a little exercise. So if you're listening to this at home, go ahead, take out a pen and a piece of paper or your sketchbook, and we're going to think about how can you make your products more niche. So I want you to think about these questions. Keep in mind that you don't have to niche your product in all categories. You don't have to have a niche material, a niche subject matter, a niche aesthetic, and a niche brand, because that's real specific. But you should hopefully come up with a way that maybe in one of those four, you can make your product more niche. So let's start with materials. What materials are you currently working with? Now, how many other designers in your product category work with these materials? If the answer is most of them, it might be time to think about working with something else. And then think back to what you've done before. Are there any materials you've previously worked with or are interested in that a lot of people in your product category aren't working with? Maybe you think back to like, hey, I remember that time in grad school that I was making stuff out of balloons and that was really cool. Maybe I'll go back to that. So that's one way you can think about a niche. The next one is your subject matter. Can you sum up the subject matter of your work in one sentence? How about one word? I know a lot of people who are like, my work is about nature and architecture and houses and cows and farms and the tension between man and nature, and that's a lot of stuff. So can you sum it up a little more succinctly? So if your work spans a lot of ideas, is there one that you could focus on that makes you stand out? So again, maybe you're not going to pick the one that everyone else in your product category is doing. What's a subject matter that you care a lot about that could make you stand out? And then is there an obscure or cult topic, thing, or idea that you love that you could incorporate into your work? So maybe you are like a closet Veronica Mars fan, but you don't really want to put it in your work because you're like, it's kind of lame. Well, guess what? There are actually a lot of other people who would probably love that too if you incorporated that into your work. So think about what you love. All right, aesthetic or style. How broad or narrow is your aesthetic? Could you refine it? Then the next question is it distinctive? If you pull up your product in the Etsy searches, does it look like everybody else's product? And then is there a dominant aesthetic in your product category? And can you do the opposite of that? And finally, branding. Is all your current branding generic? If someone looked at your branding, would they immediately recognize it as you? And is there a stance, position, or side you could take in your branding? So, are you really like passionate about some issue, and could you bring that into the way you brand your products, even if your products aren't totally related to that issue? All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about the second key component of finding your market, and that's your customers. So you need to understand who is buying your products. This information should influence everything about your marketing efforts, from the ads you place, to the shows you do, to the stores and galleries you target, to the way you photograph your products and write product descriptions. Everything you do should be influenced by who is buying your product. And that's because I really believe in this idea of customer-focused marketing, making your marketing directed at your customer. The more you know about your customer, the more you can provide information and ideas that are relevant and interesting to them. All right, so take a minute and just visualize your ideal customer. For a lot of people, when you tend to think of your customer, we tend to think of it as a wide demographic. Say it's like 30 to 50, it's female, they like to shop. But this isn't actually very helpful. You'll be most effective if you can narrow that demographic down to a single ideal customer. So we're going to aim for the bullseye and identify your one ideal customer. When you think about the target market for your products, think of it as a bullseye. At the center of the target is your ideal customer, the one specific person who feels like your products were designed just for them and is willing to buy lots of them. You should be able to describe this customer in exacting detail. Okay, so not every person who buys your product will fit this exact profile, but that's why you're going to build the rest of the bullseye out around them. Each ring of the bullseye represents a slight broadening of the demographic of your ideal customer, a slightly broader age range, a wider geographic net, maybe more varied hobbies. And of course, you will have people who don't fit your target profile at all. People who are buying gifts for your target customer, people who just defied convention. We're going to be grateful for these people, but we're not going to build our target customer profile around them. So I'm going to give you a real world example, my ideal customer for my jewelry business. And this is something I've been developing over the last couple of years using the strategies that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So my ideal customer is a 42-year-old female interior designer from the inner suburbs of Boston who enjoys travel, cooking, and art museums. She's well educated, she's liberal, she's well off, and she has dark hair and an olive-skinned or darker complexion. Now, as you expand these rings out, you'll find that the age range of my customer increases to say like 30 to 55, the geographic location increases to the urban centers or suburbs of say San Francisco, Philly, New York, Washington, Seattle, and our occupation might expand to include other design professions. And then as we bring the bullseye out further, it's going to expand to other urban and suburban and affluent areas and those interested in style, art, and design, though not necessarily employed in those fields. Now, from this profile, I can determine what magazines she reads, what blogs and websites she frequents, and what stores she shops in. And I can tailor my marketing and my promotion to her, whether it's advertising, blog posts, email marketing, shows I participate in, all of those sorts of things. And I share this example with you not so that you can be like, yes, that's my ideal customer too, but so that you can see how very specific I started, because I think when most people do this exercise, they make the mistake of not being specific enough. All right, so let's do another exercise where we define your ideal customer. So grab that piece of paper or your sketchbook again. So your ideal customer, are they male or are they female? How old are they? Where do they live? And where do they live can be a couple of different things. It can be different geographic regions. Do they live in the city? Do they live in the suburbs? Do they live in the country? What do they look like? There's actually, some people tend to gravitate towards different kinds of products. Are they in a relationship? Are they married? Are they single? Are they dating? Do they have kids? Do they have grandkids? What's their education level? What is their occupation? How much money do they make in a year? What are their interests and hobbies? And this one, you could probably go on and list a lot, but this is actually a really key one to give you a good profile of your customer. Where do they go on vacation? Because people like to spend money on stuff when they're on vacation. What do they read? What do they watch? What do they listen to? How would you define their style? Are they a trend follower? Do they kind of go with what everyone else is doing, or do they have their own distinct voice? Do they have a lot of friends, or are they a loner? This is important because you need to know if your ideal customer is a social shopper. Does he or she need their friends to help them make decisions, or do they buy things on their own? Do they prefer to stay home or go out? Are they going to shop online, or would they rather go to a craft show and touch everything? All right, so now that you've done this exercise, for a lot of people, you come out with an ideal customer who looks a lot like you. But I just want to tell you that your ideal customer is not you. That's the biggest mistake that people make the first time they do this exercise. What happens is, you know you, you know what you like your product, so you end up coming up with a person who looks a lot like you. But the problem is, your ideal customer is not the person who uses your product. Your ideal customer is the person who buys your products. True, you're going to wear or use your own products, but you don't buy them, you make them, which is why your ideal customer is going to have something different than you. So again, ideal customer, person who buys your products. All right, so you're saying if my ideal customer isn't me, then how do I figure out who my ideal customer is? Market research, which I promise is more fun than it sounds. So let's just start by saying too that identifying your target market is easier with a niche product. So let's go back to that Twin Peaks embroidery example. They know their target market, people who are fans of Twin Peaks. Well, there's a lot of information out there that they can find that tells them that people who are fans of Twin Peaks are between a certain age. Let's face it, I don't think there are many 12-year-olds running around like, yay, Twin Peaks. So that's going to help you define your target market. All right, so when it comes to market research, in-person selling is the best form of market research. So if you've never done an event where you go out and interact with other people, whether that's a craft show, an art fair, a gallery opening, anything like that, you're missing out on the best opportunity to research your target market. And that profile that I shared with you guys of my ideal customer, that's developed by lots and lots of in-person research. So this is Crafty Bastards, the craft show in DC, where you can do a ton of great in-person research. So you're going to build a profile of your ideal customer through both observation and conversation. These are the two things that you're going to do anytime you're in a setting where people are interacting with your products. So the first one is observation. You're going to pay attention when you're doing a show, when you're on an opening, to the types of people that interact with your products. Who seems most enthusiastic? Who doesn't even look your way? Who doesn't look your way is a key. For some reason, when I started out with my jewelry, I was thinking my ideal market was like 20-something fashionistas. And then after doing shows and watching all the 20-something fashionistas walk by my booth without ever even turning their heads, I was like, maybe that's not my target market. So who doesn't look at your products or who's not interested can tell you just as much as who is. And then, of course, the key thing, who buys your product. Not just who's excited about it, but who's actually giving you money in exchange for goods, because that's your real ideal customer. So again, those kind of ideal customer questions that we asked before, you can ask as you're at a show. So are they male or female? Are they young, middle-aged, or old? How do they dress? Do they have a certain style? Are they following trends? This is really important. As a designer, you should be aware of trends even if you aren't following them, because you can't spot who's following trends if you have no idea what the trends are. Are they shopping alone or with friends or with family? Do they have kids with them, or do they have like the telltale signs that they have kids but they've escaped from the house without them for 2 hours? How much do they spend, and which products do they buy? I think this is really key too, figuring out which things people are gravitating towards. So when you're doing a show, obviously it can be hectic, but you want to try to take notes to review and look for trends afterwards. So sometimes this could be as simple as keeping a little notebook in your office area, kind of like making some hash marks, you know, like, oh, that person was like 40. Oh, that person was like 30. I know you can't tell everybody's age, but you can make some pretty smart guesses. So I like to just sort of observe, and then when I'm done, I'll get home and kind of make notes about who I saw. It's also helpful to have someone else in the booth with you who can give you their feedback. Like, yeah, I noticed that too. There were a lot of like 45-year-old women really digging on your stuff. So it's helpful to have a friend to kind of do some of that market research too. Then conversation. After you observe people, it's also really important to talk to the people in your booth or at a show. So you can ask them, like, are they buying for themselves or are they buying it as a gift for someone else? Do they live nearby or did they travel? So, like at Crafty Bastards in DC, I want to know, are they from Adams Morgan, the area of DC that the show is in, or did they come in from somewhere else to come shop the show? Do they come to the show or place frequently, or is it their first time? Did they see anything else at the show that they liked or bought? This helps you see the other types of products that they're interested in. Now, you don't want to do this in a prying way. You're not going to like subject people to 20 questions as they're paying for their item. You're not going to be like, what else did you buy? Is this for you? Do you live nearby? You're not going to do that. You want to keep it conversational. You don't have to ask every person that comes into your booth this, every single question. So it might just be like, oh, do you live nearby, as you're like ringing up their order, or oh, like, is this for you? For you or a gift thing, you can usually tell pretty easily. So again, keep it conversational, but use this as a way to get more information for about your ideal customer.